My children are hungry, the Apache widow pleads when a rancher catches her stealing eggs. The sun rose slowly over the dry, dusty land, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink. The desert was quiet, except for the occasional cry of a bird or the rustle of dry grass in the wind. In this harsh land lived a woman named Nakla, a young Apache widow. She had once lived a life filled with laughter, songs, and the warmth of her husband by her side, but that life had ended too soon. Now she faced each day alone, with only her 3 children for company. Nala's home was a small makeshift shelter, built from sticks, hides, and anything she could find. It offered little protection from the scorching sun during the day or the cold nights that followed. Despite this, she had made it her own. She had decorated it with small stones she found along the river, feathers she had collected, and the few trinkets that reminded her of happier times. These small touches gave her a sense of dignity, a reminder that even in hardship, life could have beauty. Her children, little ones who were still learning the ways of the world, clung to her as she prepared to leave for the day. Her eldest, a boy named Tyan, was just 10 but already carried responsibilities beyond his years. Her middle child, a girl named Aina, was 7, curious and lively despite the hunger in her belly. The youngest, little Kiahi, was barely 3 and still needed constant care. Their small stomachs often ached from lack of food, and Nala's heart ached more than anything. Each morning Nala left the shelter before dawn. She had learned to read the land like a book, understanding where to find water, which plants were edible, and how to avoid the dangers that lurked nearby. She walked carefully, knowing that every misstep could be fatal. Her hands, though small, were strong and skilled, able to gather roots, dig for tubers, and collect small fruits that grew in hidden corners of the desert. She carried whatever she found in a worn cloth sling, careful to bring back as much as possible for her children. The land was unforgiving. Drought had made the streams almost dry, and many of the familiar plants had withered away. Animals, too, were scarce, and the few that remained were difficult to catch or find. Nala's stomach often growled as she searched, but she knew she had to keep going. Her children needed her, and giving up was not an option. One morning, as the sun began to rise, Nala noticed a small cluster of wild berries near a dry creek bed. Her heart lifted slightly. These berries were not abundant, but they were enough to give the children a small taste of sweetness. She knelt down, gathering the berries carefully, her fingers stained with their deep red juice. She whispered a soft prayer of thanks for the food, hoping that her children would be able to enjoy them without feeling the emptiness that had been their constant companion. As she walked back to her shelter, she thought of her husband. Memories came unbidden. The way he had laughed at the smallest things, the songs they had sung around the fire, and the stories he had told of their ancestors. His absence was a weight she carried every day. She had tried to be strong, but sometimes, in the quiet moments, the sorrow was overwhelming. She pushed the thoughts aside, knowing that now her strength was not for herself, but for her children. When she returned to the shelter, her children ran to meet her, their small feet kicking up dust. Their faces lit up when they saw the berries. Tyan helped distribute them carefully, making sure Ayana and Kahi each got a fair share. They ate slowly, savoring every bite, the sweetness bringing small smiles to their tired faces. Nala watched them with a mix of pride and sadness. These small moments of joy were fleeting, but they were all she had to cling to. After the meal, Nala set her children to work in small ways. Even the youngest had small tasks suited to their age. Kai helped gather dry twigs for the fire. Ayana helped sweep the ground, and Tyan assisted his mother with heavier chores. Nayla believed that teaching her children to contribute was essential. It was not just about survival. It was about instilling a sense of responsibility and resilience that would serve them in the future. Despite our careful planning, Nala often ran into obstacles. Other people in the area did not always welcome her presence. Some settlers were suspicious of the Apache people, seeing them as intruders, even though Nala had done nothing to harm anyone. On more than one occasion, she had been chased away from lands where she tried to forage. Hunger, however, left little room for hesitation. Each day required careful decisions, balancing caution with necessity. One afternoon, As she approached a small patch of wild onions, she noticed smoke rising in the distance. Her heart tightened. Smoke usually meant people, and in her experience, people could bring danger. Nala crouched low, watching silently. She saw a group of settlers tending their cattle in fields. They seemed busy and unaware of her presence. She weighed her options. There was a small chicken coop nearby, and she knew eggs could provide much-needed nutrition for her children. Her hands trembled as she considered it. Stealing went against everything she believed in. But her children's hunger made the choice clear. Nala decided to wait until evening, when the settlers might be distracted. She hid behind a cluster of rocks, her eyes fixed on the coop. The sun began to lower, casting long shadows across the land. Her heart pounded as she crept closer, every step careful and measured. The thought of her children's small, hopeful faces pushed her forward, giving her courage she did not know she possessed. As she reached the coop, she saw eggs carefully arranged in a basket. She picked them up one by one, cradling them gently in her arms. Her mind raced with fear and anticipation. She knew she had to be careful. The settlers were near, and discovery could mean punishment or worse. Every sound made her flinch, but she pressed on, driven by the need to feed her family. The moment she turned to leave, a voice called out sharply, breaking the silence of the evening. "Hey! What do you think you're doing?" Nala froze, her heart leaping into her throat. She turned slowly and saw a tall man standing at the edge of the field, his eyes narrowed. He was the rancher she had observed earlier, the man who owned the land. For a moment, she could not speak. Fear and shame battled with the desperation that had brought her there. Then, with a trembling voice, she said, "Please, my children are hungry." The rancher's expression softened slightly, but his eyes were wary. He took a step closer, watching her carefully. Nala's arms shook as she held the eggs. She waited for his reaction, unsure if he would call for help, punish her, or show mercy. In that moment, everything hung in the balance. The survival of her family, her dignity, and the uncertain kindness of a stranger. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the dusty land. Nala and the rancher stood in silence, two people from different worlds, connected by a moment of need, fear, and hope. In the quiet that followed, Nala realized that life had become a constant test of courage and endurance. She would face many more days like this, but she would do everything in her power to protect her children, to keep them safe and fed, and to survive in a world that often seemed against her. That night, Nala returned to her shelter, clutching the precious eggs. Her children's eyes widened in amazement and joy when she handed them over. For a moment, the struggles of the day melted away, replaced by small smiles and whispered thanks. Nala sat back, exhausted, but her heart swelled with a quiet pride. She had faced the harshness of the world and had managed, even if only for a single day, to provide for her children. And as the stars appeared in the clear night sky, she whispered a prayer of hope, for courage, for survival, and for a better tomorrow. The rancher, Mr. Thompson, stood motionless for a moment, his eyes fixed on Nala. The sun had nearly disappeared behind the horizon, leaving the desert bathed in soft purples and golds. The quiet was almost unbearable, broken only by the soft clucking of chickens and the distant call of a bird returning to its nest. Nala's arm shook as she held the eggs tightly against her chest, her heart racing with fear. "I have 3 children," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They are hungry. Please, I only took a few eggs." "I didn't mean to. Her words trailed off, swallowed by the vast desert around them. Tears welled in her eyes, and she looked at him with a mixture of shame, fear, and desperation. Mr. Thompson studied her carefully. He was a man who had lived in these lands for decades, a rancher hardened by the sun, wind, and labor of countless seasons. Yet as he looked at the woman before him, he saw not a thief, but a mother desperate to save her children. Her tattered clothing, her dirt-streaked face, and the way she held the eggs with trembling hands told him a story that words could not fully capture. "This is my property," he said finally, his voice calm but firm. You know that stealing is wrong. I know, Nayla said, her voice shaking. But my children have not eaten in days. I have no one else. I cannot watch them suffer. She sank to her knees, laying the eggs gently on the ground in front of her. Please, sir, I am begging you. I only want to feed my children. Mr. Thompson felt a pang in his chest. He remembered his own children, playing in the fields just beyond the house, laughing and chasing each other under the sun. The thought of them going hungry, even for a single day, was unbearable. He had always tried to provide for them, and he had never considered what it would be like to watch them suffer from lack of food. He sighed and ran a hand across his face. The desert wind blew through the sparse trees, carrying with it the scent of dry grass and the faint tang of dust. The moment seemed suspended in time, two lives meeting at the intersection of morality and survival. One choice would decide the outcome of the evening, for Nala, for her children, and for the rancher himself. Come with me, Mr. Gillaney, Thompson said, stepping back and motioning toward the small farmhouse. Nala hesitated, unsure if he was leading her to punishment or mercy. Her heart thumped in her chest, and she glanced down at the eggs, now lying on the ground, a fragile reminder of her desperation. Inside the farmhouse, the warm light of a lamp revealed a simple but tidy home. The scent of bread, recently baked, filled the air, making Nala's stomach ache with both hunger and longing. The rancher motioned for her to sit at the table. She obeyed cautiously, her hands still trembling. I will not call the law, Mr. Franken, Thompson said after a moment. But you cannot continue to take from my property. You must understand that I cannot simply give away everything I have either. This land is how I survive, and my family relies on it.
I understand, Nala whispered. Her throat felt tight with emotion, and tears ran freely down her cheeks.
I do not wish to cause harm. I only want to keep my children alive. Miss. Thompson nodded. He reached into a cupboard and pulled out a small basket filled with food, some bread, a bit of dried meat, and a few fresh eggs from his own coop. He placed it in front of her. Take this for your children. It is not much, but it will keep them fed tonight. I hope you will find a better way to provide for them from now on. Naha's hands trembled as she accepted the basket. She felt a mixture of relief, gratitude, and lingering shame. Thank you, she said softly, her voice cracking. Thank you for your kindness. I will not forget this. Mr. Thompson studied her for a moment, seeing the deep lines of worry etched into her young face. You are lucky that I understand, he said. Many people would have been angry, or worse. You must be careful. The desert is harsh, and the world does not always show mercy. I will be careful, Nayla promised. She clutched the basket to her chest, feeling the weight of both the food and the unspoken responsibility that came with it. She could not allow her children to go hungry again. That thought alone drove her determination. As she left the farmhouse and walked back to her shelter, the night had fully descended, covering the land in a deep blue darkness. The stars sparkled overhead, like tiny lanterns scattered across the sky. The desert seemed quieter now, as if it were holding its breath along with her. Her children were waiting, eyes wide and hopeful, and when she approached, their small faces lit up at the sight of her. She handed the basket to Tyan, who helped divide the food among his siblings. Ayana clutched a piece of bread and looked up at her mother with gratitude, while little Kahi held an egg in his tiny hands, looking at it as though it were a treasure. Nala watched them eat, her heart swelling with relief and love. These small moments, these fleeting glimpses of security were all that mattered in their harsh world. That night, as the children slept, Nala sat outside the shelter and looked up at the stars. The desert stretched endlessly before her, a landscape of both beauty and danger. She thought about the morning, about the risk she had taken, and about the mercy that had been shown to her. She knew she could not survive on luck alone. The world was unforgiving, and she would need to find a way to provide for her family that did not rely on taking from others. Nahla reflected on the encounter with Mr. Thompson. It had been terrifying, yet it had also revealed a small spark of hope. People were capable of kindness, even in the harshest of times. She would remember this moment not only for the food it had brought, but for the lesson it carried. Survival was not only about strength and skill, but also about understanding, humility, and trust. The next day, Nala returned to her daily routine, gathering whatever the desert offered. She collected roots, berries, and edible plants, careful to avoid areas that had been claimed by settlers. She thought of Mr. Teach Thompson often, considering how she might show gratitude without asking for more. Perhaps there was a way to trade small goods, or to help others in return. She was determined to find a path that would allow her children to survive without fear of punishment. Over the following days, Nahla's life became a careful balance of risk and caution. She ventured further into the desert searching for new sources of food and water. She learned to read the subtle signs of the land, the tracks of animals, the direction of the wind, and the faint changes in plant life that indicated moisture. Her skills grew sharper, and with each day she gained more confidence in her ability to provide for her children. Yet the memory of that night at the farmhouse never left her. She thought often of Mr. Bowens Thompson's face, the moment when he had softened, and the quiet understanding that had passed between them. It was a reminder that the world was not entirely harsh, that even in times of desperation, small acts of compassion could make a profound difference. Nala also began to teach her children small lessons about survival. She showed Tyan how to find edible roots, Ayana how to gather berries safely, and even little Kaihi how to recognize safe plants. It became a daily practice, a way to ensure that they could each contribute to the family's survival. In doing so, she hoped to instill resilience and resourcefulness in them, traits that would serve them for the rest of their lives. Despite the ongoing challenges, Nala felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew that life would remain difficult, that hunger and danger were constant companions. But she also knew that courage, careful planning, and the small kindnesses of others could make the impossible possible. And as she watched her children sleep peacefully that night, she whispered a prayer of thanks for the unexpected mercy that had allowed them to eat, to survive, and to hope for a brighter tomorrow. The desert remained vast and unforgiving, but Nala's spirit, fueled by love and determination, was unyielding. She had faced fear, hunger, and uncertainty, and yet she had emerged stronger. The lessons of those nights, mercy, courage, and perseverance, would guide her in the days to come, as she continued to navigate the harsh, beautiful, and often unforgiving world of the Arizona Territory. The days following the encounter with Mr. Thompson passed slowly for Nala. She rose each morning with the same determination, yet her mind was never truly at rest. The gift of food from the rancher had been a small mercy, a reprieve from the gnawing hunger that had shadowed her family for weeks. But Nahla knew that mercy alone could not save them. She needed a plan, a way to provide for her children consistently, without fear or shame. Each morning she set out into the desert, gathering whatever the land could offer. She had learned to recognize the subtle signs of water hidden beneath dry earth, the rare green shoots that promised nourishment, and the tiny insects and roots that could sustain her family. Her hands, once soft from caring for her children, had grown calloused and strong. Her eyes, once filled with sorrow, now scanned the horizon constantly, alert to danger, opportunity, and signs of life. Tyan, her eldest, followed her closely, learning each skill she demonstrated. He watched as she dug roots with careful precision, identifying those that were safe to eat. He observed the tracks of small animals, learning which ones could provide food if caught, and which were best left alone. He learned patience and caution, and with each lesson, he felt a sense of pride in his growing abilities. Ayana, though younger, had a keen mind and quick hands. She collected berries and small vegetables that Nala had pointed out, and she learned to identify the patterns of the desert, the changes in plant growth that indicated moisture or hidden streams. Even little Kahi, who was too small to carry much, learned to recognize safe plants and to help gather kindling for the fire. Every day, Nala felt a sense of hope as she watched her children grow more capable, more resilient. Despite her careful planning, Nala faced challenges at every turn. The desert was unpredictable. One day, a sudden storm swept across the land, turning dry crevices into rushing streams of mud and water. She struggled to keep her children safe, carrying Kihai on her back and guiding Tayan and Ayana through the treacherous terrain. The storm lasted only a few hours, but it left the land slippery and dangerous, making even simple tasks like gathering food a challenge. On other days, settlers passed through the area, watching her cautiously. Some ignored her, but others whispered among themselves, casting wary glances. Nala understood their fear. She was an Apache woman surviving in a world that had become increasingly hostile to her people. Still, she moved carefully, avoiding confrontation whenever possible. Her survival depended on caution, patience, and quick thinking. Word of Nala's presence began to spread slowly. Some settlers had seen her moving quietly through the desert, carrying food back to her children. Rumors began to circulate, though most were tinged with curiosity rather than malice. Nahla did not seek attention, nor did she wish to cause trouble. Her only concern was keeping her children fed and safe. She continued to move silently through the desert, avoiding areas where she might be confronted. One morning, Nala discovered a small, hidden patch of wild onions and herbs. The plants were fresh and abundant, a rare blessing in the harsh land. She knelt carefully, gathering them into her cloth sling. The smell of the onions was strong but comforting, a sign that the desert could still provide for those who looked closely. She thought of her children, imagining the smiles on their faces when she returned. The thought gave her strength, pushing her through exhaustion and fear. Nala also began to think creatively about ways to supplement their diet. She had always been skilled with her hands, and she decided to trade small handmade items with settlers in exchange for food. She crafted simple baskets from reeds and twigs, weaving them carefully into sturdy containers. She made small mats and simple tools, items that could be useful in a settler's home. Each day, she carried these items cautiously to the edge of the settler's land, leaving them where they could be found. Occasionally, she received food in return, a loaf of bread, a small piece of dried meat, or a few eggs. These small exchanges brought a sense of dignity back into Nala's life. She no longer had to rely solely on stealth and fear. She could earn sustenance through her own skill and effort. It was not a perfect solution, but it allowed her to maintain a sense of pride while feeding her children. The children, too, learned the value of hard work and ingenuity. They watched their mother carefully, understanding that survival required more than luck. It required cleverness, patience, and determination. Even with these small successes, Nala remained aware of the dangers that surrounded them. Wild animals sometimes ventured near their shelter searching for food. One evening, she spotted a coyote circling the area, its eyes glowing in the fading light. She stood silently, watching as the animal passed without harm, thankful that her careful planning had kept her family safe. She knew that the desert could be unforgiving, and she taught her children to respect the land and its creatures, understanding that survival meant living in balance with the world around them. Despite the hardships, Nala found moments of joy. She sang softly to her children at night, the melody carrying over the quiet desert. She told them stories of their ancestors, of the courage and wisdom that had carried their people through generations. She shared memories of their father, keeping his spirit alive in their hearts. These moments, small and fleeting, reminded her that life was not only about struggle, it was about love, hope, and the bonds that held them together. Nahala also began to notice the subtle changes in her children. Tayan grew more confident, taking initiative in gathering food and helping his siblings. Ayana became more patient and careful, learning to anticipate challenges before they arose. Ayana became more patient and careful. Little Kai, though still small, began to imitate his mother's actions, learning through observation and play. Each day brought growth, and Nahla felt a quiet pride in their resilience. The settlers, too, began to see Nala in a new light. Some of them noticed her careful movements and the skill with which she gathered food. They began to understand that she was not a thief, but a mother striving to survive. A few of the more compassionate settlers left small portions of food near the path she traveled, knowing that a little kindness could make a significant difference. These small acts of generosity strengthened Nala's resolve, reminding her that even in a harsh world, there were still people willing to help. As weeks passed, Nala developed a routine that balanced caution, creativity, and care. She rose early each morning, moving quietly through the desert, gathering what she could. She returned to her shelter in the evening, distributing food to her children and teaching them the skills they would need to survive. She crafted items to trade, leaving them for settlers in exchange for sustenance. She monitored the land carefully, aware of the dangers that lurked nearby. Through it all, Nala's heart remained focused on her children. She knew that every choice she made, every risk she took, was for their survival. Her determination never wavered, and she carried the weight of responsibility with quiet strength. She had learned that survival required more than courage. It required wisdom, patience, and the ability to adapt to whatever challenges the world presented. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the desert turned shades of gold and purple, Nala sat outside her shelter with her children. They shared a small meal, the food supplemented by the bounty of the land and the trades she had made. Tyann and Ayana laughed softly, recounting small adventures from their day. Little Kiahi clutched a piece of bread, smiling as he listened. Nahla watched them with a mixture of love, relief, and quiet pride. She thought of the moment when Mr. Thompson had shown her mercy, giving her food when she had none. That act of kindness had changed the course of her days, reminding her that even in the harshest circumstances, compassion could make a difference. It had inspired her to seek creative ways to survive, to find hope in the small blessings that life provided. As night fell and the stars emerged, Nala whispered a prayer of gratitude. She thanked the land for its hidden gifts, the settlers for their small acts of generosity, and the strength that allowed her to continue. She knew that challenges would continue to come, that hunger and danger were never far away. But she also knew that she and her children had the courage, skill, and resilience to face whatever lay ahead. In the quiet desert night, Nahla felt a sense of hope that she had not experienced in weeks. Her children slept peacefully, and for the first time in a long while she allowed herself a moment to breathe, to believe that survival was possible. The journey ahead would not be easy, but she had learned that love, determination, and creativity could carry them through even the harshest times. And so, with the desert wind whispering through the trees and the stars shining above, Nala prepared herself for the days to come. She would continue to gather, to teach, to trade, and to protect her children. She would find ways to live with dignity and courage, even in a world that often seemed indifferent. For Nala, survival was not just about feeding the body. It was about nurturing hope, fostering resilience, and keeping the flame of life burning bright for those she loved most. Days turned into weeks, and weeks slowly became months. Nala's life was a rhythm of survival, careful planning, and small victories. Each day brought new challenges, but it also offered opportunities for her to grow stronger and more capable. The desert remained harsh and unforgiving, yet Nala began to notice small signs of hope that reassured her heart. She had learned to read the land, to find nourishment even in unlikely places, and to protect her children from both danger and despair. The children thrived slowly under her guidance. Tyann had become a reliable helper, capable of gathering food on his own and assisting his mother without needing constant supervision. He had learned to recognize edible plants, track small animals, and even help in setting traps for birds and rabbits, always ensuring that their survival came with care and respect for the land. He was no longer just a boy, he was a young protector, aware of the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Ayana, clever and observant, had grown in confidence. She knew which plants could be harvested safely and which were poisonous. She had learned to identify small streams and hidden waterholes, understanding the subtle cues in the desert that hinted at life. Little Kai, though small, followed his siblings' lead, imitating their actions, learning through observation, and slowly becoming more independent. Nala watched them with pride, realizing that their growth was a reflection of her own strength and perseverance. Despite these small successes, life was still difficult. One afternoon, as Nala gathered wild herbs near a dry creek bed, she noticed that some of the familiar plants had withered. The desert was unforgiving, and a lack of rain had caused parts of the land to become barren. She could feel the panic rising in her chest. How could she feed her children if the land itself refused to provide? She knew she had to find another solution quickly. She decided to visit the edge of the settler lands more regularly, hoping to find additional ways to trade her handmade goods for food. She approached cautiously, keeping to the shadows and moving silently. Over time, she realized that not all settlers were unkind or suspicious. A few had noticed her skill and determination, and they began to leave small amounts of food near the paths she traveled. It was not enough to feed her family fully, but it helped supplement the meager bounty of the desert. Nala's life became a delicate balance between caution and resourcefulness. She learned to plan her movements carefully, avoiding areas where she might be confronted or challenged. She studied the habits of the settlers, learning when they were busy with their work and when it was safe to move. Each step required thought and care. But with every cautious journey, she grew more confident in her ability to provide for her family. One evening, as Nala returned to her shelter with a small bundle of herbs and dried roots, she noticed smoke rising from a nearby hill. Her heart tightened. Smoke usually meant people, and people often brought uncertainty. She crouched low, observing silently. To her relief, she saw a few settlers tending a small fire, cooking a modest meal. They had not noticed her presence. The sight reminded Nala that there were people in the world who, while strangers, could coexist peacefully if treated with respect and care. Despite the small victories, Nala faced moments of doubt and fear. There were nights when the wind howled through the desert, carrying the chill of approaching winter. The children would shiver in their shelter, and Nala would wrap them in whatever cloth and hide she could find. She whispered soft prayers, asking for strength, protection, and the courage to continue. Hunger was never far, and the weight of responsibility pressed on her shoulders relentlessly. One particularly difficult day, Nala found herself with barely enough food to feed her children. The desert had offered little, and the trades with settlers had been sparse. She felt desperation rising, a gnawing fear that she had not felt before. Her hands trembled as she tried to gather roots from hard, dry soil. She looked at the sun, now high and scorching, and knew that time was running out. The thought of her children going hungry drove her forward, forcing her to keep searching, keep moving, keep fighting for their survival. In her search for sustenance, Nala discovered a small hidden waterhole surrounded by lush plants. It was a rare gift from the desert, a hidden corner where life still thrived. She knelt carefully, washing her hands and gathering the edible plants that grew nearby. Her heart lifted with relief. She knew that these small blessings, though fleeting, could sustain her family for days if used wisely. She also knew that she had to guard this place carefully, for it would not remain hidden forever. Nala continued to teach her children the importance of respect and gratitude for the land. She showed them how to gather only what they needed, leaving the rest for the desert and its creatures. She emphasized patience, observation, and the value of every small effort. The children absorbed these lessons eagerly, understanding that survival required more than just physical strength. It required wisdom, empathy, and careful attention to the world around them. One morning, Nala noticed Tyan practicing with a small handmade trap, attempting to catch birds without harming them. She smiled quietly, impressed by his ingenuity. She guided him gently, showing him how to be both careful and effective.
Ayana joined in, observing closely and offering suggestions.
Even little Kai watched intently, learning through imitation. The children's skills were growing, and Nahla felt a sense of hope that had been absent for a long time. Nahla also began to reflect on her encounter with Mr. Dalek Thompson, the rancher who had shown her mercy. His kindness had sparked a new way of thinking in her mind. She realized that survival did not have to rely solely on stealth or desperation. It could also involve trust, communication, and small acts of cooperation. While the world was harsh, there were moments when humanity and understanding could provide a lifeline, even in the most unlikely circumstances. One day she gathered enough roots, herbs, and a few eggs from a cautious visit to a settler's barn to prepare a small, nourishing meal. She shared it with her children, watching as they ate slowly, savoring each bite. The joy on their faces was a balm to her weary heart. These moments, simple and fleeting, were proof that life could still hold beauty and hope amidst the struggle. Nala's reputation among some settlers quietly grew. Those who observed her carefully noted her skill, diligence, and respect for the land. While not everyone trusted her, a few began to offer small gestures of goodwill. A handful of corn, a loaf of bread left at the edge of a field, or advice on where to find edible plants. Nala accepted these gifts with gratitude, always mindful to honor the trust placed in her and to ensure that her actions never caused harm. Despite the small improvements, Nala remained vigilant. The desert held hidden dangers: snakes, harsh storms, and the constant threat of hunger. Each day required careful planning, attention, and courage. Yet with every challenge she overcame, her confidence grew. She learned to read the land as her own story, understanding its rhythms, its secrets, and its lessons. As winter approached, Nala knew that survival would require even greater effort. She reinforced the shelter, gathered more firewood, and prepared stores of dried herbs and roots. She continued to teach her children, emphasizing the importance of resourcefulness and preparedness. She reminded them that even in the harshest times, their love for each other, their courage, and their intelligence were powerful tools for survival. One evening, as Nala sat outside her shelter watching the stars appear one by one, she felt a quiet sense of pride. Her children slept peacefully inside, warm and fed, and the desert lay calm around her. The struggles of the past months had been immense, yet they had survived. She thought of the journey ahead, knowing it would still be difficult, but she felt a renewed sense of hope. The small victories, the skills her children had learned, and the moments of kindness she had experienced gave her confidence that they could continue to thrive, no matter what the desert threw at them. Nala understood that survival was more than simply finding food or avoiding danger. It was about courage, adaptability, and the wisdom to navigate both the land and human relationships. It was about nurturing her children, teaching them resilience, and fostering a sense of hope that would carry them forward. And as she gazed at the stars, she whispered a prayer of gratitude for the lessons learned, the people who had shown kindness, and the small blessings that made life worth living. She knew that there would be more hardships, that hunger and fear would return in different forms, but she also knew that she had the strength to face them, the intelligence to find solutions, and the love of her children to guide her. Each day, each decision, each small act of courage built a path forward. And though the desert was vast and often unforgiving, Nala had learned that even in the harshest conditions, hope could take root, grow, and flourish. Winter had passed, and with it came a fragile sense of calm to the desert. The days were warmer now, and the land showed faint signs of life returning after the harsh months. Naha's family had endured the cold, hunger, and danger, and they had grown stronger together. Each day brought lessons and small victories, and Naha began to notice how much her children had matured in her absence of guidance and love. Diane had become a young leader, his small hands capable and confident. He took on the role of helper and protector, assisting his mother in gathering food, tending to little Kihai, and even keeping an eye on Ayana as she roamed nearby. Ayana had grown wise beyond her years, noticing small changes in the land, finding hidden streams, and alerting Nala to potential dangers. Even little Kahi had developed confidence and curiosity, exploring their shelter and the surrounding desert with cautious excitement. Nala watched them, feeling a mixture of pride, relief, and quiet joy. Life was still not easy. Food was never plentiful, and the desert could turn from calm to dangerous in moments. Sometimes, wild animals approached their small shelter, drawn by the smell of roots, berries, or eggs. Once, a coyote came close enough to frighten the children, but Nala's careful preparation and quick thinking ensured that it left without harm. Every day was a test, every challenge a lesson in resilience. Yet Nala had learned to face each moment with courage, patience, and careful planning. Her encounters with settlers had also shaped her experience. Over time, a quiet understanding had grown between her and a few compassionate neighbors. They respected her skill, her dedication to her children, and her careful avoidance of conflict. Some left food or helpful advice. Others offered guidance about plants, water, or safer routes through the desert. Nala accepted these gifts with gratitude and humility, always careful to maintain respect for their generosity and the trust that came with it. These small alliances became a lifeline, showing her that survival could be strengthened through cooperation, understanding, and respect. One evening, as the sky turned shades of orange and pink, Nayla sat with her children outside their shelter. They had gathered enough roots and herbs for a small meal, supplemented by eggs from their cautious visits to the settlers' barns. The children ate slowly, savoring every bite. Nala watched their faces, noting how much they had grown, how resilient and capable they had become. She felt a quiet pride swell within her heart. After the meal, Nayla spoke softly to her children, telling them stories of the past, of their father and of the ancestors who had faced hardships similar to their own. She emphasized the importance of courage, wisdom, and kindness, explaining that survival was not only about food or shelter but also about the lessons learned and the strength found within one's heart. The children listened intently, their eyes wide, absorbing every word, and understanding that these teachings would guide them for the rest of their lives. The memory of Mr. Bent Thompson, the rancher who had shown her mercy months earlier, lingered in Nala's thoughts. That single act of kindness had changed the course of her family's survival. It had taught her that there was hope in unexpected places, that compassion could exist even in a world filled with hardship. She had carried that lesson forward, showing it to her children through her own actions. She realized that acts of mercy and understanding could ripple outward, touching lives in ways that seemed small but were profoundly meaningful. As time passed, Nala and her children began to thrive in small but significant ways. They learned to cultivate small patches of edible plants near their shelter, ensuring a modest but reliable source of food. They refined their methods of gathering roots, herbs, and wild vegetables, becoming more efficient and careful with each harvest. The children's skills grew, and they became more confident in their ability to help the family survive. These small victories brought joy and stability to their lives, reinforcing the lessons of perseverance and ingenuity that Nala had worked so hard to instill. Nala also found herself reflecting on her own journey. She had faced fear, hunger, and uncertainty with courage, yet she had never allowed despair to define her. She had learned to adapt to the harshness of the desert, to find hope in small blessings, and to build trust with those willing to show compassion. She realized that survival was not simply a matter of strength or skill. It was about resilience, wisdom, and the ability to see opportunities even in the most challenging circumstances. One afternoon, Nala noticed a small group of children from a nearby settlement playing near the edge of the desert. They were curious and unafraid, laughing and chasing each other in the fading light. Nala approached slowly, keeping a safe distance, and observed them with interest. She realized that her own children could one day interact with others, forming connections that would expand their understanding of the world beyond survival. The thought filled her with hope. She began to teach her children about kindness, empathy, and cooperation, not just with their family, but with others they might encounter. Winter came again, bringing harsher winds and colder nights. Nala and her children worked tirelessly to prepare. They reinforced their shelter, collected additional firewood, and stored dried roots and herbs. They had learned to plan for the worst while hoping for the best. Each night Nala whispered prayers of gratitude for their survival and strength, asking for continued guidance and protection. The children slept nearby, warm and safe, their trust in their mother unwavering. Through these trials, Nayla began to notice the slow but steady growth of her children's spirits. Tyan showed leadership and initiative, Ayana demonstrated cleverness and observation, and Kehai displayed courage and curiosity. Each had grown stronger, wiser, and more capable. Nala knew that these qualities would serve them for the rest of their lives, shaping not only their survival but also their character. She felt a sense of peace, knowing that the lesson she had imparted would carry forward even when she could not always be present. As spring approached, the desert began to bloom again, offering fresh plants and new sources of nourishment. Nala felt a sense of relief and accomplishment. Her careful planning, perseverance, and creativity had ensured her family's survival. They had endured harsh seasons, faced danger, and overcome hunger. They had learned to work together, to respect the land, and to find hope even in small blessings. Life had not been easy, but they had endured, stronger and more united than ever before. One evening, as the family sat outside their shelter watching the sunset, Nala spoke softly to her children. She reminded them of the hardships they had faced and the lessons they had learned. She emphasized the importance of courage, compassion, and perseverance, explaining that these qualities would guide them in the years to come. The children listened intently, understanding the significance of her words and the journey they had shared. Nayla's thoughts drifted back to the moment when Mr. Thompson had shown her mercy. That single act of kindness had been a turning point, a reminder that even in a world filled with challenges, hope and compassion could exist. She realized that her own actions had mirrored that mercy, extending care, patience, and understanding to her children and to those who had helped her. The cycle of compassion had given her family the strength to survive and thrive. In the quiet of the night, Nayla reflected on the journey they had undertaken. The desert had tested them, hunger had challenged them, and fear had pressed upon them relentlessly. Yet through it all they had endured. Nala felt a deep sense of pride in her children, in herself, and in the quiet strength that had guided them. She understood that survival was not merely about enduring hardship, it was about learning, adapting, and finding hope in even the smallest of blessings. As the stars filled the sky, Nala whispered a prayer of gratitude. She thanked the desert for its hidden gifts, the settlers for their small acts of kindness, and the strength that had carried her family through difficult times. She thought of the future, imagining her children growing into capable, compassionate adults who would face the world with courage and wisdom. Her heart swelled with hope, knowing that they were prepared to navigate the challenges ahead. The desert remained vast and unpredictable, yet Nala had learned to find peace within it. She had discovered the power of perseverance, the value of knowledge, and the importance of compassion. She had guided her children through fear and hunger, teaching them to respect the land, care for one another, and find hope even in the darkest moments. In the years to come, Nala's children would carry the lessons of survival, courage, and compassion with them. They would remember the moments of fear and hunger, the nights spent huddled together under the stars, and the small victories that had kept them alive. They would carry forward the values their mother had instilled: resilience, empathy, and the understanding that even in hardship hope could flourish. And as Nahala watched her children sleep peacefully under the night sky, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. She had faced the harshest trials and had emerged stronger. She had protected her family, nurtured their growth, and shown them the power of courage and love. The desert was still vast, still challenging, but it was no longer a place of despair. It was a place of life, learning, and hope, a place where Nala and her children had found the strength to survive, thrive, and look forward to the days ahead.